Hello everyone, and welcome to my YNR official 24 channel. Matt strangles Sharon and causes a horrific accident. Nick is hospitalized. The young and the restless explodes into one of its darkest, most emotionally devastating chapters ever as Genoa City is plunged into chaos, betrayal, and heartbreak when Matt's descent into madness reaches a terrifying peak, beginning on an otherwise ordinary night that no one could have predicted would end in blood, sirens, and shattered lives, because Sharon Newman, already fragile from weeks of mounting tension and half-buried fears, finds herself alone with Matt in a moment that turns from uneasy to deadly in seconds, his voice low and shaking as years of resentment, secrets, and obsession pour out of him in a frantic confession that makes Sharon's skin crawl, and when she tries to reason with him, tries to remind him that he still has a choice, Matt snaps, his hands flying to her throat as his eyes glaze over with a frightening mix of rage and desperation, squeezing until Sharon's vision blurs and the room spins, her nails clawing uselessly at his wrists as memories of her children, of Nick, of all the battles she has survived, flash through her mind, and though Matt releases her just before she loses consciousness, the damage is already done, because in his panic he drags her toward the door, determined to flee the scene, and in the struggle Sharon stumbles, crashes into a table, and collapses in a heap, gasping for air, while Matt bolts into the night, unaware that this single violent act will ignite a chain reaction that will nearly cost Nick Newman his life. Because Sharon, shaking and bruised, manages to call Nick with trembling fingers, leaving a broken, breathless message that barely makes sense, but is enough to send him racing across town with his heart pounding and fear clawing at his chest, and Nick, driven by love and guilt and the unshakable feeling that he has failed Sharon one too many times, drives too fast, ignores the rain slicking the roads, ignores the warning signs, and as fate would have it, Matt himself is speeding through the same storm-darkened streets, mind unraveling, eyes darting to every shadow, and when Nick recognizes Matt's car ahead of him, something primal takes over, anger and terror colliding as he follows, desperate for answers, desperate to stop him, and the pursuit becomes reckless, two men spiraling toward disaster, until one sharp turn, one hydroplaning tire, one blinding flash of headlights sends metal screaming against metal as Nick's car slams into a guardrail and flips, the sound echoing through the night like a gunshot, while Matt's car skids to a halt yards away, smoke rising, and for one suspended moment Matt considers running, leaving Nick to die, but the sight of Nick's broken body through the shattered windshield shakes him to his core, forcing him to confront the horror he has unleashed, yet before he can act, sirens wail in the distance, and Matt disappears into the darkness, leaving Nick unconscious and bleeding as first responders rush to the scene, and news of the accident spreads through Genoa City like wildfire, reaching Sharon in the hospital where she is being treated for bruising and lack of oxygen, the doctor's words barely registering as she hears that Nick has been in a serious crash, her world collapsing in on itself as she sobs that this is all her fault, that if she hadn't called him, if she hadn't trusted Matt, none of this would have happened. While at the Newman Ranch, Victor's fury is volcanic as he learns that his son is fighting for his life, his rage laser-focused on Matt, swearing that whoever hurt Nick will pay, and Nikki, pale and trembling, prays at Nick's bedside, reliving every moment she has almost lost her children, while Faith, Summer, and Noah are shattered by fear and confusion, struggling to understand how everything went so wrong so fast, and as Nick is rushed into emergency surgery with internal injuries and a traumatic brain injury, doctors warning that the next few hours are critical, Sharon sits in the waiting room, drowning in guilt, haunted by the memory of Matt's hands around her throat, unable to shake the feeling that this nightmare is far from over, because Matt on the run is unraveling, replaying the strangulation, the crash, Nick's lifeless form, and instead of remorse bringing clarity, it drives him deeper into delusion, convincing himself that Sharon drove him to this, that Nick always stood in his way, that fate is forcing him to finish what he started, and back at the hospital, tension reaches a breaking point when Victor confronts Sharon, demanding answers, his grief-fueled anger cutting deep as he accuses her of dragging Nick into danger yet again, words that slice into Sharon's already fractured heart, while Nikki intervenes, reminding Victor that blame can wait. But the damage is done, and Sharon retreats inward, convinced she deserves every ounce of pain, until the doctor emerges with grim news that Nick has survived surgery but remains in a coma, his prognosis uncertain. Setting the stage for agonizing days of waiting where every beep of a monitor feels like a countdown, and as Genoa City holds its breath, secrets begin to surface, with security footage placing Matt near the crash site, whispers spreading, and Chance launching a manhunt, while Sharon, bruises blooming around her neck, finally finds the courage to tell the truth about the assault, her voice shaking as she recounts the terror, shocking everyone who hears it and solidifying Matt as a monster in the eyes of the town. Yet even then, Sharon struggles with conflicting emotions, remembering the man Matt once was, questioning how love and trust can twist into something so violent, and as days pass, Nick's condition fluctuates, moments of hope crushed by setbacks, his loved ones taking turns at his bedside, sharing memories, begging him to wake up, and when Sharon finally gathers the strength to sit with him alone, she breaks down completely, apologizing through tears, promising that she will never let anyone hurt him again, unaware that Matt, desperate and cornered, is watching from afar, plotting one final, unthinkable move, setting up a showdown that will force every character to confront their darkest fears, because in true The Young and the Restless fashion, this is not just a story about an accident or an act of violence, but about the fragile line between love and obsession, the devastating consequences of unchecked rage, and the enduring strength of family and forgiveness in the face of unimaginable trauma, leaving viewers breathless, devastated, and desperate to see whether Nick will awaken, whether Sharon can heal from the horror she survived, and whether Genoa City will ever be the same again after a single moment of madness changed everything forever. The nightmare only deepens as the days stretch into a torturous blur, because Nick's coma becomes the silent axis around which everyone's lives now revolve, each hour marked by the mechanical rhythm of hospital monitors and the unbearable waiting that gnaws at the soul, and Sharon, unable to escape the echo of Matt's fingers tightening around her throat, finds herself reliving that moment again and again, waking in cold sweats, gasping for air, her body remembering the terror even when her mind begs for rest, and yet she refuses to leave Nick's side for long, convinced that if she stays close enough, if she speaks to him, if she pours every ounce of love and regret into her words, somehow he will hear her and fight his way back, while Victor's determination to destroy Matt grows colder and more calculated by the hour, his grief transforming into a ruthless focus that alarms even those closest to him. Because Victor Newman does not forgive harm to his family, and this time the wound is too deep, too personal, igniting old demons that remind everyone why he is both feared and respected in Genoa City, and as Chance and the G-Speedy tighten their net, discovering evidence that links Matt not only to the assault on Sharon but to a pattern of escalating violence. Flashbacks reveal how Matt's obsession was quietly building for months, small controlling behaviors dismissed as concern, jealous glances written off as insecurity, until the truth becomes undeniable. The warning signs were there all along, and that realization weighs heavily on Sharon, who blames herself for not seeing it sooner, for trusting when she should have walked away, for believing she could save someone who was already slipping beyond reason, while Faith, torn between anger and fear, struggles to reconcile the man who hurt her mother with the memories of someone who once made her laugh, forcing her to confront the painful truth that monsters are not always strangers. Sometimes they are people we let close, and as Nick's children gather in the waiting room, sharing whispered conversations and tearful embraces, old family tensions dissolve under the weight of a common fear. Summer clinging to Noah, Faith snapping at everyone 1 minute and collapsing the next, all of them united by the terrifying possibility that their father might never wake up, and Nikki, haunted by memories of past tragedies, tries to be the pillar everyone needs, even as she quietly falls apart when no one is watching. her prayers growing more desperate, more raw, bargaining with fate in the way only a mother who has almost lost everything can understand. And amid it all, Sharon's bruises become more visible, not just on her neck but in her spirit, as whispers spread through the hospital and the town, some sympathetic, others cruel, and when an overheard conversation implies that she led Matt on, Sharon nearly shatters, only to be steadied by an unexpected ally in Phyllis, who, despite years of rivalry and resentment, recognizes the unmistakable signs of abuse and stands fiercely in Sharon's defense, proving that even the deepest feuds can dissolve in the face of true horror. And as this fragile sense of solidarity forms, the focus shifts back to Matt, whose descent continues in isolation, hiding in abandoned places, surviving on adrenaline and delusion, convincing himself that he is the real victim, that Sharon betrayed him, that Nick stole everything from him, his thoughts spiraling until reality becomes warped, and in chilling scenes, he watches old videos, rereads messages, rewriting history to justify his actions, while chance closes in, following a trail that suggests Matt is not done, that his fixation on Sharon and Nick has only intensified, raising the stakes and casting a shadow of imminent danger over the hospital itself, because even as Nick lies unconscious, he remains the center of Matt's twisted narrative, the symbol of everything Matt believes was taken from him. And this threat becomes terrifyingly real when Sharon notices small signs that someone has been watching her, a feeling she cannot shake, the sense of being hunted returning full force, forcing her to confront the reality that survival is not just about healing, but about facing fear head-on. And when she finally breaks down and confesses to Nick's unconscious form that she is terrified Matt will come back, that she doesn't know how much more she can endure, her voice cracks in a way that seems to pierce the stillness of the room, and in a moment that leaves viewers breathless, Nick's fingers twitch ever so slightly, igniting a spark of hope that spreads like wildfire, doctors cautioning that it may be a reflex, but Sharon clings to it as proof that he is still fighting, that her words reached him, and as this fragile hope takes root, Victor doubles security, turning the hospital into a fortress, determined that no further harm will come to his family, even as tensions rise between him and Chance over jurisdiction and tactics, revealing the familiar clash between law and power, while elsewhere, secrets begin to unravel as evidence surfaces that Matt may have had help, or at least an enabler, someone who ignored his instability or even encouraged his worst impulses, sending shockwaves through Genoa City as suspicion spreads and friendships are tested. Because the idea that this horror could have been prevented becomes almost as painful as the violence itself, and as Nick's condition slowly, agonizingly improves, with doctors noting subtle responses to voices and touch, each small sign becomes a victory celebrated with tears and cautious smiles, yet the emotional toll continues to mount, because recovery, if it comes, will be long and uncertain, and Sharon knows that even if Nick wakes up, nothing will ever be the same, the innocence of trust shattered, the sense of safety permanently altered, and in a powerful moment of resolve, Sharon decides she will no longer be silent or ashamed, choosing to speak publicly about what Matt did, not just for herself, but for anyone who has ever felt trapped or afraid, her bravery resonating across the community and reframing her pain as strength, even as it enrages Matt, who sees her reclaiming her voice as the ultimate betrayal, pushing him toward a final act that threatens to undo every fragile step toward healing. And as the story hurtles toward its next explosive turning point, viewers are left gripping the edge of their seats, knowing that in the young and the restless, survival is never just about living through the trauma, but about facing the consequences, confronting the darkness, and finding a way to choose love, truth, and resilience in a world where one moment of madness can change everything forever. Nick remained in a fragile state, hovering on the edge of life and death, each beep of the heart monitor a stark reminder of the razor-thin line between hope and despair. Sharon barely left his side, even when exhaustion made her limbs feel like lead. She slept in a chair next to him, clutching a blanket around her shoulders, and in her dreams, Matt's hands closed around her throat again and again, the the sensation so vivid that she would wake screaming, only to be met with the cold hospital light and the stillness of Nick's unconscious body. Every moment she spent by his side was a battle between gratitude for his survival and the unbearable guilt of her own trauma. Sharon knew that if Matt had not attacked her, if she hadn't called Nick in her terror, none of this would have happened, but the thought of blaming herself fully was impossible. She had tried to protect herself, and yet protection had turned into catastrophe. Meanwhile, Victor Newman's fury was a living, breathing force that seemed to fill every room he entered. He paced the hospital corridors endlessly, talking to no one and everyone at once, demanding updates on Nick's condition, interrogating doctors, nurses, and security staff, and leaving no detail unchecked. His rage was volcanic, yet his calculated mind already began to plan retribution. Matt had not just hurt his family, he had struck at the very heart of the Newman legacy. The thought of letting him roam free was unthinkable. Victor's internal struggle, as always, balanced on the line between justice and vengeance, and he was determined to make sure Matt paid, yet not in a way that could compromise the law, or at least, not entirely. In the waiting room, Sharon's closest friends and family clustered around her, offering words of comfort that barely reached her ears. Nikki held her hand, her own hands trembling, whispering prayers under her breath. Faith, Summer, and Noah had been through trauma before, but nothing could prepare them for the sight of their father broken, fighting for his life. Each of them tried to support Sharon while battling their own fear and anger. Summer, normally sharp-tongued and quick to react, broke down in tears in front of Faith, confessing that she hadn't realized how fragile life could be, how suddenly everything could shift from normal to catastrophic. Faith, usually the voice of reason, could barely stop herself from lashing out at the slightest mention of Matt's name, her young face contorted with a mixture of grief and fury. The hospital became a nerve center of activity, a war zone of emotion and logistical chaos. Doctors rotated in and out of Nick's ICU room, delivering updates, answering questions, and sometimes delivering bad news that no one wanted to hear. Sharon clung to every subtle twitch of Nick's fingers, every slight change in his breathing, interpreting them as signs of hope. But alongside the hope was a creeping dread, the knowledge that even if Nick survived the coma, he would never emerge unscathed from the trauma, physically, emotionally, or psychologically. The accident was not a single moment. It was a rupture that would affect him and everyone around him for years. And then there was Matt. His absence was like a shadow over every scene, an invisible predator that kept Sharon on edge. She could feel his presence everywhere. Even in moments of supposed safety, she found herself glancing over her shoulder, imagining him waiting, lurking, ready to strike again. Matt's own psyche had deteriorated further in isolation. Each passing day fed his delusions, turning rational thought into a tangled web of paranoia and anger. In his mind, he was still the victim, still justified, still righting a perceived wrong. He replayed every encounter with Sharon, every confrontation with Nick, twisting events in his memory until his rage became a force that could only be satisfied through one final, decisive act of violence. Chance Newman, the relentless and determined detective, intensified his search. He reviewed footage, cross-referenced reports, and followed every lead, knowing that the clock was ticking. The longer Matt remained free, the greater the danger to Sharon, Nick, and possibly others. Every day, Chance felt the weight of responsibility pressing down harder, haunted by the thought that one missed clue could be catastrophic. He coordinated with local police, conducted stakeouts, and combed through Matt's known associates, trying to predict where he might strike next. The tension was palpable, like a tightly wound spring ready to snap. Within this crucible of fear and tension, unexpected alliances began to form. Phyllis, once Sharon's adversary, stepped into the role of protector, offering both practical support and emotional validation. She defended Sharon when whispers of blame arose, insisting that the fault lay entirely with Matt. Even as the trauma of the attack forced Sharon to confront her vulnerabilities, Phyllis's presence reminded her that she was not alone, that there were still allies willing to fight alongside her. willing to hold her up when she could barely stand herself. Yet, Genoa City could not stay quiet. News of Nick's hospitalization and Sharon's assault spread quickly, generating gossip, speculation, and fear across town. Some whispers were sympathetic, others cruel, insinuating that Sharon had somehow invited danger. Social media, local news outlets, and word of mouth all carried fragments of truth and lies, each narrative shaping public perception, adding to Sharon's anxiety and complicating the efforts of law enforcement. The town was on edge, bracing for further catastrophe.